ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back again, and thank you for joining me in this lecture. So, I do appreciate your commitment and your responsibility, and at the same time, your concern about this question of human rights and media tracking. Let's continue our lecture. So, I think that we had a very fruitful discussion this morning, and I can see that students were very engaged and they understand, okay, what do you mean by human rights issues, and this is something that I do appreciate a lot. To continue our lecture, so this lecture will be about institutional framework of human rights. As I have said before, when we talked about the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, so I said that that declaration, of course, has generated many other covenants and many other international treaties and many other local, international, regional organizations and associations. So this is the thing that we are going to see in this lecture. So the objectives. Okay. So the first objective is to understand the role of institutions in human rights. So we should know and have acquire some knowledge about those institutions. What are those institutions that have come out of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, to identify major international human rights bodies. So we are going to be introduced to local, regional, international treaties and frameworks. To explore regional organizations and their influence, we are going also to discuss, to have some opportunity to discuss a vision future about these organizations, to examine national institutions and their rules, and this is something very important. So we can, I can give you some time maybe later on to talk about some Indian organizations and to share knowledge. This is the thing that I did with you this morning. You have been acquainted to some Moroccan organizations that concern, of course, themselves with this issue of human rights and media tracking. So I would like also to learn from you. So I will give you some time, okay, to introduce some very prominent, very seminal organization, Indian organizations that devote, of course, that devote themselves to defending human rights and protecting human rights. So these are the objectives. So what is the institutional framework of human rights? So this is maybe the first question that's maybe raised in this context. So we mean by the institutional framework of human rights, it's a structure that is established to protect and promote human rights globally and locally. So when we talk about institutions, about organizations, about associations, so of course in the whole world there are many global, like universal, international institutions that we all know, and I'm going to introduce them to you. And at the same time, as I said in this morning, so there are some local organizations and the country, each country has the freedom, of course, to opt for the relevant, the suitable association or organization that of course will devote itself to defending human rights, protecting human rights, advocating for human rights, but at the same time within a very specific cultural context. So also this institutional framework consists of international, regional, and national institutions. And sometimes, even if we would like to establish an association in our countries, so that association, the law of the association should be adapted, okay, and should be within the international institutions, or within the law of course that governs regional, global, and local institutions. So the role of the institutional framework is to support the enforcement and to monitor, of course, a human rights standards. So this is something very important, and this is why we need such institutions. We have been talking about how to protect human rights, for example, inside our countries, or how to implement what is on the papers, how to render what is on paper into a reality. So these are some institutions, or each country, for example, establishes institutions to just defend and protect human rights, and at the same time to track a human rights violation, because this is the role of those institutions, not just to advocate for human rights, but to track and to follow and to decipher human rights violation. And these violations, of course, concern not just men in general, but it concerns, like, when we have like in those associations, sub associations. Like sometimes we find women's associations, like children associations, people with disabilities associations. So we have many. There are many sub associations within local or within global associations. But after or before getting into those institutional frameworks, of course, which are global, so we have been talking about human rights, and human rights, of course, have principles. And those principles, we should understand them. I do believe that the first, as I have said before, the first thing that we should be familiar with, and we should acquire, and we should learn, is our human rights. And to learn our human rights, we should learn with them the principles of human rights. And sometimes, yes, we do know that we do enjoy the right to life, the right to dignity, to respect, for example, to freedom from discrimination, to freedom from torture, from slavery. Yes, this is something very good, but we should at the same time know that those rights, they have principles. And these are the principles of human rights. So they are characterized by universality and inalienability. So human rights, they are universal, and they apply to every individual, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, religion, skin color, for example, gender, or status, your social status, whether you are poor or rich. So you are titled to your human rights. So they are very universal, they are very global and inalienable. They are inalienable, meaning that they cannot be taken away from you, okay, except in specific situations. But you enjoy them, except in incarceration, for example, or in the trial. But even the trial should be within, of course, the principles of the law. They are also indivisible. So indivisibility, this is something, or a principle that characterized, of course, human rights. So they are indivisible and interdependent. What does it mean? It means we cannot say, for example, that you enjoy civil rights at this very particular place, but you don't enjoy political rights at that place. No. So they are interdependent, and they are inseparable. When you enjoy your rights, you will enjoy them inseparably. It means you will enjoy your civil, political, cultural, economic rights. Okay, so this is what we mean by indivisibility. So they are indivisible. We cannot separate them. We cannot devise them. You cannot, for example, and this is what is happening in many countries. For example, you may find many people, yes, they can enjoy their cultural rights, but they cannot enjoy their political rights, and they face, for example, suppression when it comes to freedom of speech, for example. So they cannot express themselves at all. Why? Because you find that the country dedicates, for example, many suppressive rules or laws, okay, on people's speech. And this is something very dangerous that we suffer from. But if we implement human rights as such, so of course we will not have any issue. We will not have any problem. So as I have said, so all these rights, so they are very essential, and they are connected. We cannot separate them. When you come to academia, when you come to the university, so of course you should enjoy your cultural, your social. This is your rights, your civil rights, and all your rights inseparably. They are all connected, and you should enjoy them. And I will give you another example. Sometimes when we talk about about this indivisibility, because this is the issue that we suffer from. Sometimes, yes, the country agrees upon many international treaties that concern human rights. It's fine, but sometimes you find in especially in patriarchal societies, you find men, for example, they enjoy political, civil, economic rights, but you find to the detriment of whom, of women. So you find the women, they maybe they can enjoy like cultural rights, but they cannot enjoy civil political rights, for example. So you see here, even for example, children. Sometimes you find in many societies that kids, they don't have the right to express themselves. Children don't have the right to express their opinions, and this is something. This is indivisibility. So they have the right to life, maybe they have the right to liberty, they have the right to freedom from discrimination, yes, maybe, but they don't have the right, for example, to express themselves, and this is again an issue. So you see, this is something very important in human rights. So they should be very connected, they should be interdependent. Either you enjoy all your rights or not. So this is the issue, and this is the thing that we should fight for. Okay, we should enjoy all our rights inseparably, and we should connect to our rights, because we are inherently entitled to all these rights. Good. So this is something which is very important concerning human principles. Also, we talk about accountability. Accountability and rule law. So the law is very important, and I think that we have discussed this issue, because sometimes, yes, we do agree upon many treaties and many legal documents, but this again an issue, because we cannot implement, especially what is very tangible in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Sometimes even in our countries, for example, there are many like articles in our constitutions which guarantee human beings, okay, or citizens, their rights, but to what extent those rights they enjoy this accountability under law. Sometimes we cannot, it's very hard to implement them 100%, and this is the challenge that most countries are facing nowadays, and this is why we are here. So we are here to suggest, why not propose solutions, suggest solutions, why not, because sometimes I do believe that education, knowledge, so it can have this power, okay, to transform the world into a better place, and this is what we aspire to. Good. So there is also participation and inclusion. So every person has the right to participate in decision making processes that affect their lives. This principle emphasizes inclusion, allowing marginalized and vulnerable groups to be involved in special decisions. And this is something which is very important. Sometimes we find that women are excluded from decision making in many countries, even for example European countries. Okay, so we cannot just blame African countries or Asian countries. Even in the United States, sometimes, okay, we find women's rights violations, and we find children's rights violations, and you see what's happening in the whole world. So you follow the mass media, and you see to what extent human rights are violated, unfortunately speaking. So as I have said, so when you know your rights, so of course you should know that your rights that you enjoy, and that every person everywhere, okay, should enjoy. So those rights, they are universal, they are inalienable, they are equal and non-discriminatory, they are indivisible, they are accountable, and they are of course inclusive. So these are the major principles that you should know about human rights, and this is something very important. Yes. So, of course, there is also interdependency. So, I have talked about how they are indivisible and they are very connected. Accessibility, you should know your rights. And this is something very important that I emphasize here, because I know that sometimes, even in academia, in many universities, not just in Asia or Africa, but even in Europe or the United States, so students, even I'm talking about from my my angle, from my own perspective. Sometimes even students, yes, they go to the university, but they don't ask about their rights. They don't know their duties at university or at academia. They don't know even their rights, and this is something not that satisfactory. So once you enter academia, so you should ask about your rights. You should know your rights. And many, if you ask, if you handle an interview and if you ask students, okay, do you know your rights inside the university? So they will say no. Okay, why? Because this is something that they should be introduced to from the very beginning. When they enter academia, once they step into the university or into the campus, so they should have sessions, okay, of about raising their consciousness about their rights. They should know their duties and they should know their rights. And this is something very accessibility. This is accessibility. You should have access to your rights and you should know your rights, because if you don't know your rights, so how can you defend them? How can you protect them? And how can you even implement them? How can you enjoy them? We do have many rights, but sometimes we don't know them. Autonomy, so our rights, they are autonomous. Each individual has his or her own rights, okay? Each one. Each kid, for example, each woman, each individual in our society. And what you should know is that even within the human rights principles, we talk about rights. This is something very important that you should know. But at the same time, we shouldn't neglect our obligations. So we have many obligations in our societies, in our communities, and we should, of course, be very engaged in our societies if we aspire for an inclusive community, for an inclusive society. So we should know both. Not just we should enjoy our rights and we practice them. Yes, that's very nice. But at the same time, we should know our obligations. We should be aware of our duties if we would like to serve our societies as we should be. And this is our duty, is to be very good citizens, very contributors. So we should contribute to our societies. We should contribute to building our communities, to building our societies. And when you work, for example, when you practice a job, so this is building your country. You are a very good citizen. So this is something that you should aspire to in order to build your communities in a very good way. In order to have you should have a noble mission. So sometimes it's very nice to talk about human rights, and sometimes we fight for human rights and we just blame other people that they deprive us, they suppress us. Yes, this is something very, very nice. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget about our obligation towards our countries. Yes, we want something from our country, but what is the thing that we will give our country? So we should even ask those questions, and we should be very, very aware and very conscious of these questions, because they are preponderant and they are of paramount importance. Dignity also. So this is something that is it's the most important right. It's to have this dignity, the right to dignity. This is something very, very important, because if you don't have dignity, so you cannot be a good citizen, and you cannot enjoy your life. You cannot eat well. You cannot enjoy your welfare. It's impossible. Dignity, this is something, it's the most important right that people should enjoy wherever they are and whoever they are, however they are, and whatever they are. So they should enjoy this dignity, because this will pave the way for the other rights. If you enjoy your dignity, of course, automatically speaking, you will enjoy the other rights. Yes, okay. So so in order to implement those human rights principles, and in order to implement, of course, to control to what extent those human rights are implemented, and to what extent those principles are enjoyed by the populations in communities wherever they are. So of course there are many human rights institutional bodies, and as I said this morning, so these international institutional bodies, so they derive from the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, so the UNDR, and of course after this declaration, so many international bodies have been generated. Like what? Like the international treaties. We have also regional treaties. There are also constitutions. So each for example, each country has its own constitution, and that constitution most of the time it is very adapted to the United Nations declarations of human rights. Most countries, for example, who aspire, which of course aspire for prosperity, peace, resilience, and so on and so forth, so of course they have been, or they adapt their laws with the United Nations declaration of human rights. So, and beside the constitution, so there is the national law. And of course, what you should know in this context is that why do we have those international bodies and those human rights bodies? Because they are of paramount importance. Why? Because sometimes you cannot, this is even politically speaking, you cannot go to a country and say, well, you should implement the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. No, they shouldn't. Why? Because each country has specificities. Each country has its own cultural context. Each country has its norms, its values. So of course, most countries in the world, yes, they have agreed upon this declaration, but they have established their own institutional, constitutional, regional bodies, okay, that have the purpose of defending and protecting human rights inside their own countries with respect to their norms, to their values, and to their cultural ideas. Okay, so this is the thing. And of course, there are, in addition to those institutional bodies, so there are also the human rights instruments, for example. So I will show you many human rights instruments, and the lecture of tomorrow will be more detailed because we are going to stop at many covenants in order to see what's going on inside those covenants. And maybe even tomorrow we are going to read all together the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights to know what's new about that declaration and what are the rights that we should know about that declaration. So you see, so here is the human rights instruments. So of course there are regional instruments like the European Convention on Human Rights. There is also the American Convention on Human Rights in 1969. There is also the African Charter on Human Rights People, on Human and People's Rights. And all these covenants, for example, or conventions that I have mentioned here, so they are each continent sometimes, so they the members of the organization, they gather to just sign a very big convention, like the European, for example, Convention on Human Rights, like the American Convention on Human Rights, like the African Charter. And beside those, there is also the International Criminal Court established in 2002, in 2002. This is a very important organization. Good. So here you have the human rights instruments, as you see. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, established in 1948. So I have talked about it, but tomorrow we are going to read some articles and maybe discuss them. Why not? Also, there is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So that will be the topic of lecture number 3, and also the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So tomorrow we are going to deal with these covenants in a very detailed way, because that will be the lecture. We will explore the content of these covenants and to what is their influence, and at the same time to what extent they have affected either positively or negatively human rights all over the world. There is also the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights also. So this is something which is very, this is an instrument of human rights, which is very important, and it is an instrument within the United Nations. The Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which I discussed with you this morning. This is also very, very interesting and very important. Then we have the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. This is also a very important convention, and it like it saves countries, okay. From whom, from which we see, for example, many this process of immigration, because this law protects, of course, the rights of migrant people, of diasporic people, and this is something which is very important, especially if we know that the world, maybe when we study post-colonial theory, so we know that the world is divided into sometimes two polarities, the West and the East, and sometimes people from the East, they immigrate to the West, and in order to just maybe save their rights, to protect and defend their rights. So this is the role of this international convention on the protection of the rights of all migrant workers, diasporic people, and members, also members of their families. So this is very important, and it concerns us because in our, like in our country, in my country, for example, so many people, they immigrate to Europe, to Spain, to Portugal, okay, so they cross the borders. Why? Because they just aspire for a better life there, and so on and so forth. So this organization is for those immigrant people all over the world. Why? To protect their rights while being in the West, while being in not their native country. Okay, so these are again some very particular instruments, and we are going to stop at those institutions later on, like the CEDAW. I think that this is something very famous convention on the elimination of all forms against women that was established by the United Nations in 1979. This is a very important convention, and out of this convention, of course, many civil associations, many women's associations, of course, have seen light in many countries, and women started to strive for their rights, try to galvanize in order to defend their own rights, especially in patriarchal societies. Well, we are going to see this convention. We are going to focus on it while dealing with gender and human rights, and we are going to see to what extent this organization, of course, serve this issue of women's rights. Well, there is also the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. But this is signed in 1965, and this is something very important in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So there is an article about freedom from slavery, freedom from racial discrimination, freedom from torture. Okay, so this is something very important. We have talked about the right to dignity. How can you have your dignity, or that right to dignity, and you are experiencing racial discrimination? And this organization is, or this convention, this is the purpose for this convention, is to just to fight against, okay, racial discrimination. And sometimes when we talk about, we are going to see this, sometimes we do face in our societies, in our communities, because we do share many experiences. Though I am from Morocco, but I feel that I share many experiences with Indian people, for example. And the first thing is our humanity, but we do share many cultural ideas and many cultural aspects. So sometimes, and this is what you should know, is that sometimes we find people, they suffer from racial discrimination because of their race, and sometimes at the same time they suffer from gender discrimination because of their gender. So you see how many things they suffer from, and sometimes even they suffer from political suppression. So you see how many things they suffer from, and this is what we call, and later on I'm going to delve into this question. This is what we call intersectionality. And this intersectionality is very important in when we deal with the issue of human rights, because as Gayatri Spivak claims in her seminal wonderful essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? If people from the English department, maybe they know about Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. So she claims that when you are a woman, so you are You are a victim three times because of your race, because of your sex, and because of your color. So this is intersectionality. And unfortunately speaking, we find many people, so they suffer. Imagine, for example, a kid. So he or she, for example, is suffering from color of his or her skin, then because he is or she is a kid, then because she or he belongs to that very particular country, and so on and so forth, then because of race. So you see how all these things sometimes intersect, okay, to what, to violate that human rights. So you see, this is something that we should be aware of. Why? As I have said before, when we talk about human rights, so we shouldn't divide them and separate them. If we would like to fight for human rights, so we should fight for human rights in their generality, okay, in their connectivity. So we shouldn't separate them as well. So maybe today you are going to enjoy political rights, but tomorrow you will not. And this is the moody strategy of many politicians, okay, unfortunately speaking. So we should be aware of all these things while dealing with human rights issues. And we are going to see how the mass media plays, okay. Sometimes we can deduce how mass media plays a very sensitive role, okay, taking into consideration all these things. Good. So let's continue the instrument. So we've been talking about the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. Then the CATE is the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. This is also a very important issue because it is very related to journalists, because you see sometimes when a journalist is very frank and when he or she claims the truth, so sometimes he or she is punished for that truth. So this convention is signed in order to protect those people, but to what extent it is very feasible, to what extent it is very concrete, it is very real. So that is the question that we should ask. So because sometimes it's very nice, it's very enjoyable to see all these treaties, but at the same time I like students to reflect on them, okay, critically speaking. Because you see what's going, if you just wonder on all the things what's going on in the world, so you will be very astonished, sometimes very surprised, and you will ask questions. How come we have all these institutions, all these conventions, and still we face human violations, still we face gender discrimination, still we face slavery, still we face wars, tortures, punishment. So how come? So these are the questions that we should ask, and we are here all together to learn from each other, at the same time maybe to think it over and to think about, to suggest solutions. Why not? Well, so there is also the CRC, and this is something very important. Fortunately speaking, we'll have a lecture about children and human rights. So this convention on the rights of the child, and fortunately, so you see nowadays that many children, they are really in torture, and they are facing torture. They are facing starvation. They are very hungry all over the world. You see children in Gaza, for example, what's happening to them nowadays, unfortunately speaking. So sometimes you admire, you do appreciate those conventions, but in reality when you see the real thing, so you get very surprised and you get disappointed sometimes. But I don't want to be very negative and disappoint students, because we hope for the best things, and we would like to change the world into something better. So of course there is, we cannot ignore human rights violation, we cannot ignore especially children rights violation, okay. So especially what we watch on television these days in Gaza. So this is something that it's a trauma really, and that is something that we just feel pity, okay, on those kids. Okay, they are in a very miserable situation. So we just ask questions: where are all these those conventions. Some students talked this morning about how can we implement, and that sometimes, yes, it's very good to appreciate all these things, but in reality we don't see them. Okay, in reality we don't. It's very hard to implement them. But anyway, so we hope for the best, and we can triumph. Okay, on all these traumas, okay, to aspire for a better world. Good. So there is also the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers. So we have talked about it. The International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. This is also, as I have said before, it's like the other convention when I talked about. The Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, Degrading Treatment or Punishment. So this is also, it concerns most of the time journalists, okay, or most of the time, for example, people who devote themselves to saying the truth, or to conveying the truth sometimes, or even when they write an article. Okay, so they are punished, okay, because they have said that truth. This international convention is to protect them, to protect all persons from enforced disappearance, okay, from exile, let's call it. This is because you know that in all times, so people were very exiled. So of course this convention has been signed in the United Nations in order to protect those people. Okay, so these are human rights instruments. So as you see, there are many human rights instruments, and still even nowadays, so the United Nations is all the time working, okay, to promote and to defend human rights and to sign many other conventions, because sometimes it's reality that generates those conventions, not vice versa. Well, so let's see, of course, the human rights organizations. So, as I have said, this is also it's this is also the outcome of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So, as you see, the United Nations Human Rights Council, we talked about it this morning, and this council, of course, plays a very outstanding role in defending human rights. And not just that, but it suggests the global strategy for the whole world, and then later on the countries, they adapt that strategy with their own cultural, political, social, economic context. I think that we talked this morning about Omar Znibar, and we listened to his speech and about the global strategy of this United Nations Human Rights Council. Well, so there is also the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. This is also an office within the United Nations. So you see that this very big organization. So really, it devotes itself to promoting and defending, protecting human rights. Through what? Through assigning and establishing those organizations. There's also Human Rights Watch, and I think that you are familiar with this. So Human Rights Watch, this is a very famous organization that, of course, devotes itself to promoting human rights. Amnesty International also, and there is also, by the way, there is, if you can consult the website, so you will find so many issues about Amnesty International, even their magazine and their journal. This is something very, very important. We are going to get back to these issues when we'll delve into media tracking, when we'll delve into some journal in development journalism, and we are going to see to what extent these organizations also they work with incorporation with media, okay, in order to publish, of course, and to disseminate their agenda, because they cannot do everything without the mass media. So this is something very, very important, to disseminate their strategies and their agenda. There is also the International Criminal Court. So this is also an organization which is very important, and it concerns people all over the world, and especially journalists. So this is just grosso modo concerning human rights organizations and human rights instruments and human rights principles. and also regional, local, global, international organizations that devote themselves to protecting and defending human rights. Of course, next lecture we are going to focus on three big conventions. The first one, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. We are going to see in details the rights that we are all entitled to. Then we are going to focus on the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights, then the International Convention of Social, Cultural, and Economic Rights, because these are, I do believe, these are the most important conventions that we should get familiar with. So this is the end of the lecture. So the reference, so it's the website of the official website of the United Nations. So students who would like to just go deeper into the issue, beside the books that I have already assigned to you this morning. So also in those books, so you will see all those organizations and conventions, but it depends. You will see them according to the opinion of the writer. But anyway, when you have access to the United Nations website, so you will get familiar with the work of this organization, and with you will know the sub organizations, their roles, and at the same time you will get familiar with human rights violations, relatively speaking. Okay, so we cannot just uphold the whole truth about it. Well, so as usual, so there will be, if we have some time, I don't know exactly, but I have just a workshop for you. So it's entitled Vision for the Future. This workshop will serve as foundational introduction, paving the way for more advanced training on specific human rights issues or institutional mechanisms. So the group activity that you will be engaged to is that participants are going to work in groups to propose reforms or innovations. I can see that this morning many students have been engaged in criticizing what's going on in reality, and they claim something which is very healthy, that all what we have in the international in all these international organizations, it's very ideal, it's very sometimes very utopian. That's very nice, very optimistic. But when it comes to reality, so we get disappointed sometimes, disillusioned even. So in order to just maybe stop this disillusionment, so this is what I suggest to you. So please try to propose reforms or innovations for improving international human rights institutions and frameworks. If you criticize those institutions, and if you are not that maybe you don't feel that satisfied with those institutions, try to be very creative. And why not, yes, why not suggesting a framework, maybe even within your campus, within the university, to just maybe fight for, not fight, but anyway, so we don't want to fight, but just to maybe to advance students' rights. Why not? So I think if we have time, I can give you time to do the workshop. We'll see with Dr. Capo. If we don't have, maybe it will be like as a homework. Then tomorrow, maybe we will have some time to discuss. Thank you very much for your attention. Do you have any questions, by the way, or should we finish?
I Good evening, ma'am. I don't want to have any. I don't have any questions. I have just some reflections.
Yes, yes, sure.
The video you have shown the morning session. This is great
Oh, there
personality.
is another one, but maybe
Great,
tomorrow.
great personality, Omar Jennifer. He was also saying about the principles of the human rights.
Yes, yes, yes.
So he was just recollecting us. So
Yes.
we should give more emphasizing those things.
Mhm.
So he just point out gender disparities.
Yes, yes.
So he was also emphasizing that why
Exactly.
when MDG goal,
Yes.
third number,
Exactly.
there is talking about promoting gender equality and empowerment
Yes.
to women, and also SDG goal, which is after 2050, the duration is till 2030. There also it's again they have revised those sustainable goals. There they are talking in goal number 5, achieve gender equality and empower to all women
Yeah.
and girls. They have added girls because when we are talking about the women, it's only focusing those ladies or those are married, but they are emphasizing that we should give clear indication. This is not only within the girls,
Yeah.
within the women. Sorry, we should be focused on the girls also.
Yes.
So
Yes.
where
Very good remark. Yes.
where this our great personality, he was saying that
Mhm.
we should focus with those aspects.
Mhm.
And my views is that
Yes.
their education is the one of the instrument there it can promote or it can
Exactly.
protect
Yes.
those aspects.
Of course.
How in NDC goal number 2, there is talking about achieving universal primary education. So when we are teaching those aspects from the beginning of the life of the children, those primary education can be promoted. So they are also somehow those organization and SDG and NDG goal is interlinked. And in the Indian context, now NEP 2020 National Education Policy, they are
Yes.
also talking about inclusivity in the higher education,
Yes. Yes.
higher education,
Specificity, yes.
education. And back to that, in NEP 1986, there they are focusing about uh, children rights and children nutrition, even for the women.
Mhm.
So I think those ideas India has adopted from those
Yes, of course.
those organizations.
Yes, from those
So
national,
how
international
that
treaties.
is why our great personality he was saying. So we are on the developing stage. So he was clearly mentioned we are on the developing stage, but by very fast we cannot achieve until unless we are in together.
Yeah, exactly.
That is he was saying that. And he was also about the island. So in that island, that is we see uh, most of the time it is out of the context sometimes. So maybe he was talking about those human that should be reached in the unreached area, not only in island, some other aspects, and where that is where you are saying somehow the great philosopher or great educationist Paulo Freire in his
Yes.
book
Okay.
the pedagogy
Yes.
of praise
Yes, yes.
that it was so when human rights they cannot enjoy or they cannot feel they might be under the oppressed by the oppression group.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it is
Yes.
just another thing. So when this oppression of these things has come up, but we can come with some positivity. That is the next what I think next
Yeah.
class or next thing.
Yes, yeah. You can vision the future. You can vision a better future. Why
Yeah,
not?
I think all of us can vision.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for these insightful remarks. Okay, so you were very concise and precise, and I do appreciate that you have been very interested in the lecture and you have been even concentrating on every single detail. So this is something very important to me. I would like to hear other students, and I do appreciate students' engagement in the lecture because this is why I am here. I would like also to learn about Indian experiences, as I would like you to learn about Moroccan experiences. So you see, you have talked about how India, for example, is like making a tremendous effort to develop human rights. The same thing in Morocco. So we are really very engaged, okay, in promoting human rights and in establishing a democratic state. Yes, thank you very much, sir.